Howdy guys, welcome to Cliff Notes Travel, and this is a recap of the Amazing Race, Episode 3. Now, at the end of Episode 2, we saw the teams in Bogota, Colombia. They had eliminated a team. They'd gone from 10 down to 9, and they're ready to pursue, to move on to a new country. So where are they traveling to next? They're going to Manaus, Brazil. Now, I zoomed in while they were booking their flights, and I discovered that they actually flew to Brazil on November 14th of 2018. Almost 2 years since they did the Amazing Race. It's a long time to be sitting there waiting for this thing to air on TV. So I'm glad they finally get to watch themselves and their competition. But they are flying to Brazil. Now, I've been to Brazil many times, but I've never been to Manaus, which is in the Amazon. It's in the northwest part of Brazil. The cool things about Manaus is that this is where two rivers combine to form the Amazon River. Yeah, the Amazon River. What's really cool about it, though, is that one of the two rivers is very sandy, so it has a look of very light colored chocolate milk. The other river is very dark, so when the two combine together, they flow side by side for a while before the colors eventually merge. It's just a really cool effect. Now, when I look at on the episode, it doesn't look like a river. It looks like an ocean. The Amazon River is huge right here, but it is where the two rivers come together and where the Amazon starts. And when I think the Amazon River, when I think of Brazil, I'm not thinking about different colored waters or trade or anything else. I'm thinking of one thing, and it has to do with the little souvenir, my little show and tell for the week. In Brazil, dun, 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 dun. Yes, indeed. The famous piranha fish in Brazil. Last time I was there, I picked up a little memento, a little souvenir. This is real. It's not fake. This is a real piranha fish that some taxidermist stuffed and everything. But anyway, so yeah, that's what I think of. Now, they show in the video, in the episode, the kids swimming in the water, people fishing and all of that. So obviously piranha are not an issue. But that being said, I'll still let someone else dip their toes in the water before I step into water. But anyway, so the Amazon River, where it starts, is where the teams are heading to. Now, in the last episode, we saw the teams finished up. Hung and Chi finished in first place. As they take off this week, we see that Hung and Chi finished 3 hours ahead of the ninth place team, which seems like a big difference from start to finish for a day or two worth of racing from the last leg. We also see, though, that Hung and Chi finished about 20 minutes before the second place team, which was the football players. That seems still like quite a big time difference between first and second. Again, I'm just really impressed with Hung and Chi and how well they've done in the first two legs of the race. But with all that being said, we also are told that all 9 teams are going to be racing together on the same flight to Brazil. So they're all starting equal at this point in time. You think about how many people have to travel and how involved it is to try to book these flights. You've got the 9 teams of 2 people each. Each team has to have at least one cameraman with them at all times. So that takes you up to 27, plus all the support people, sound people, everything else. Just a lot of people involved in this operation. In fact, I grabbed a screenshot from the episode. You can see the racers, but you also see a cameraman, you see a couple of sound men. There's just a lot involved operationally, logistically in doing this race. So props to them for being able to make it happen. But again, they're all starting on equal footing as they get to Brazil. Now, we saw last week that the 5 teams that were they were on top, talked together. They said, let's align together, protect each other so we stay on top. None of us get to the bottom. Fantastic strategy. I absolutely agree with doing something like that. But we also see this week, in the opposite type situation, we also see teams actively plotting against other teams and trying to take out other teams. So as the season progresses, I think we're going to see more and more of that as well. Both of these actions are going to come into play before the day is over, before this episode is over. We do watch in the taxi cab as they're racing to the airport. Will and James, the dating guys, they're talking about that if they have the opportunity, they're going to be gunning for Leo and Alana, in part because Leo and Alana had helped the blonde sisters, Kaylin and Haley, last week during a dump truck decorating part of the challenge. And so Will and James know that those two teams are working together. They fear if they're towards the bottom with those two teams, that those two teams will help each other. They'll get eliminated. So they're ready to gun for Leo and Alana. And their concern seems to be justified because we also see in taxi cabs Leo and Alana saying that they are fine taking out strong teams if they get any chance whatsoever. They'll target specific teams, try to take them out. And we see Kaylin and Haley talking, saying, look, Leo and Alana helped us last week with that dump truck decorating. We're going to go out of our way to return the favor if all possible. We're going to help them if we can. So Will and James targeting specific teams, does that create some risk for you? Yeah, but that doesn't mean it may not be justified as well if those teams may be shooting for you. So at the airport, we see Will and James go out of their way to talk to the other 4 teams that are part of this top 5 alliance and say, we're still good, right? We're going to work together. The other teams say, absolutely, we're good. So everyone's feeling comfortable within that group of 5 teams. And it's going to pay off this week. It absolutely will. Once a team's land in Brazil, it's a mad dash, as it always is, out of the airport to grab taxis to try to head to your next challenge. And where's that challenge? They all have to head to a local market that's near the river. And the challenge, once they get to this market, and this market sells household items, it sells all kinds of food. Phil mentions that they sell 5,000 different kinds of fish, and it looks like he's absolutely right. There's a lot of produce there, but they have to go to this market. They have to shop for and buy 11 different items, including food, a hammock, some gloves, a machete, just a variety of things. Then you have to show all these items to a guy at the river dock, the dock manager, who will either approve or disapprove or shut down if you haven't bought all your items. Sounds simple enough, right? We've all bought groceries, no big deal with that, except that the lists that they have are all written in Portuguese. Makes it a little bit tougher if you don't speak Portuguese, right? So talking about the language issues, Portuguese is the language of Brazil, but you hear a lot of teams speaking Spanish as they're trying to get to the market. I personally don't speak Portuguese, no falo Portuguese, but using a little bit of English and Spanish, it's always worked pretty well for me in Brazil. I've been able to survive. It's not that hard, but it does slow things down just a little bit. The teams seem to be doing okay with the language, but especially the volleyball players, who talk about the fact that they're also fluent in Italian. And apparently there's a little bit of similarity between Italian and Portuguese, enough to just make it that much easier. So it helps them even more. And the volleyball players are part of this 5-team alliance, so it helps the other 4 teams as well, because the volleyball players, they're going out of their way to help the other members of their alliance. When they get to a stall and they want to order items, they're telling the stall owner, please, can you fill the same order for these teams over here as well? Exactly the same things that we're getting give to them. And so it's helping everyone out. Now, this market, it's a little chaos. It's a little pandemonium, because there's certain items that have to be bought at specific stalls, and the numbers of these stalls aren't sequential. They're spread out all over. A couple of items are in a fish market across the street. So you see teams just going back and forth everywhere trying to get their items bought. But eventually, most of the items have checked them all, have bought their items and are starting to head down towards the river, except for a couple. As the teams are trying to buy their ingredients, unfortunately, we see the Cajun Asian sisters of Michelle and Victoria and Jerry and Frank, the father-son duo. They're a little behind with their taxis, and when they get to the location, they can't find the market, and they end up down at the docks on the river thinking the items are to be bought there instead. That's why, from a strategy standpoint, it is so important that you do everything possible to try to stay caught up with the rest of the teams. Even if you aren't in first place, if you're at least close enough, you can see what they're doing. If they all go to the left, you know you probably shouldn't go to the right. Unfortunately, they're so far behind, they don't do that. They spend a lot of time down by the river before they finally realize the market is up the hill across the street. So it just costs them a lot more time, puts them really that much further behind everyone else. But eventually, most of the teams have bought all their items. They go down the river, they start getting them checked off. Some teams don't have any issues, but a few of the teams haven't really checked their list as closely as they should have, and they're missing items. A couple of teams had only 1 pair of gloves instead of the 2 they were supposed to buy. Jerry and Frank, the father and son duo, they had bought a wooden machete instead of the steel one like they were supposed to have. Terçado, I think, is the Portuguese word for machete. Just your FYI for the day, terçado. But they bought the wrong kind of machete, so they have to go back. As you go back, it just takes that much more time, puts you even further behind everyone else. But this is where the alliance helped. Remember, the volleyball players helped the other members of their alliance, but the volleyball players are missing something. They don't know what it is, as they're starting to try to go through all their items to figure out what they could possibly be missing. Will and James, who are also part of this alliance, lean over and say, hey, y'all are missing the extra pair of gloves. You have to have 2 pairs of gloves. So as a result, they can quickly race back up by the other pair of gloves, get back down, get checked in, so they don't lose that much time, thanks to the alliance helping each other out. Once a team has everything, at that point, they then get their next clue, which tells them they have to get on a boat and head to a small village upstream. Unfortunately, several teams have forgotten that their previous clue, the one time they go to the market, had also said when you buy these items, keep the items with you until directed to use them. And as a result, several teams get their new clue. They leave all their items on the beach, immediately head towards a boat. Danger, danger, danger right there. Multiple teams don't read that clue, leave their items behind. But once again, the alliance comes through because as some members of these alliance teams realize that others aren't getting on the boats with their items, they holler out to them. These are little water taxis. Holler out to them, say, hey, you forgot your item. Y'all got to carry these items with you. So they go back, grab their items before the boats actually take off. So they don't lose that much time compared to everyone else. But the volleyball players, because they read the whole clue and because they kept track of their items, which Will and James didn't do, they read the clue. They still had to go back and get a couple of items that they left at the beach. But the volleyball players, because they were paying attention, they move up into first place. They're the first water taxi to take off for the village upstream. Now, the Cajun Asian sisters and the father-son duo, they aren't part of that alliance, and so no one tells them to carry their items to the village. So they both get on their boats and they take off heading to this village. And I don't know, it's 20 or 30 minutes to get to the village itself. So by the time they get there and get back, you're talking 30 minutes to an hour behind everyone else because they haven't brought their items with them. Eventually, the football players who have their items, they get close enough to Michelle and Victoria's boat, and they holler at them, did y'all bring y'all's items? And they said, no. And they said, you got to have your items. So they think they're ahead enough of Victoria and Michelle that they'll go ahead and be nice and tell them about it. So they immediately turn their boat around. Michelle and Victoria head back to get their items. Unfortunately, Jerry and Frank are never close enough to anyone else's boats. They don't get the message. They get all the way to the village before they realize that they didn't bring their items with them. They then have to go all the way back again. So you're talking probably an hour that they're behind, and they already were behind before that even happened. So they're really behind the 8 ball at this point in time. Once they get to the village, the next leg is a detour that involves one of two things. You can either cook a meal following the directions of the tribal people that are there and get the chief to taste it and say if it's good or not, or you can build a roof, frame a roof that they have with a bunch of leaves, palm frond looking things that you have to go gather and then weave them into this roof. And do one or the other. The cooking looks like it takes a lot of steps, a lot of precision. The roof of leaves, it looks like if you can just figure out the pattern at the very beginning, it probably is a little bit easier to do. But if you mess up at the very beginning, it could make it for a lot longer task because you'd have to take it all apart, start over again. So I think we have about equal 5 teams doing one, 5 doing the other, more or less. They're pretty good split between the both of them. We see the teams doing that, and then we learn that once they finish that challenge, there is a hazard ahead. It's a double U-turn ahead, which means if a team gets there and chooses to use a U-turn, they can pick one other team who hasn't yet reached that point in the challenge and make them do both challenges. So if they've done the cooking, now they have to do the roof or vice versa. And 2 different teams can U-turn 2 other teams. So it's a dangerous, it can really affect one of the teams, as we'll find out. Will and James are the first ones to approach. And sure enough, remember, they talked in taxi. They wanted to target Leo and Alana, and that's exactly what they do. So now Leo and Alana, who are doing the cooking first, are also going to have to weave the roof. From that point on, once they've gotten past the U-turn, Will and James race to the checkpoint, which is a giant riverboat. They check in. They are the first team to arrive. They win a trip to Bali as a result as well, but they're the first team to arrive. Now, they paid attention to the clues, which is really what helped them get there first. But they also used a U-turn against Leo and Alana, which might make them a target on down the road. So we'll see how that works out as this season progresses. Kaylin and Haley, the blonde sisters, they reach the U-turn. They realize that Leo and Alana have been U-turned. Are going to have to do both challenges. And remember, they already said they owed Leo and Alana a favor. So in order to try to protect them, keep them in the race, they choose to U-turn Jerry and Frank, who are so far behind because they had to go all the way back for their items. So they're the last place team. They choose to U-turn them just to make sure that Leo and Alana have time to finish the task and not be in last. And it works. So Leo and Alana, they don't do that great at the challenge weaving the roof. Alana has a little bit of a breakdown while she's trying to get it done. It's hot, stressful, and all that. But they eventually get done. And because Leo and Jerry and Frank have been U-turned, it's not even close. They finish the challenge. They get to the pit stop ahead of Jerry and Frank. Watching the videos, I don't see any other teams even around Jerry and Frank while they did either challenge. So I'm guessing that the father-son duo, they were even further behind than the editing of the episode shows. I think they were way behind. So I don't know that the U-turn even really mattered. They probably would have finished last no matter what, but just to make sure Kaylin and Haley used it and paid back Leo and Alana. So we do see that the favor that Leo and Alana gave to the two blonde sisters last week has paid off now. They've gotten the favor returned. Alliances is such a huge part of this game at times. I hated to see Jerry and Frank eliminated. I really wanted to see this father-son competing a little bit further, but it wasn't physical challenges that hurt them. It was making some mistakes with clues, not having a relationship with some of the other teams that could have maybe saved them when this U-turn came into play. It just didn't quite work out for them. I'm gonna miss them. I really wanted to see them compete, but it wasn't to be. So the results of today, Will and James did finish first, but now they have an enemy in Leo and Alana, and we'll see what happens with that. Lessons from this episode. One, it is absolutely vital that you read the clues and pay attention to these clues. This is the second week in a row where people didn't read clues and it cost them a lot of time. You've got to read those clues. I think they'll get their point eventually, but read the clues. The other thing I really learned from this week, relationships, alliances can make a huge difference between survival and being eliminated. You've got, if you're in towards the front of the pack, it's easy to make alliances, but even if you're towards the back of the pack, it still pays off to have some alliances, some relationships, someone who may protect you when you really need it, as we saw with Leo and Alana this week. Guys, y'all have a great week. I will be watching episode 4 on Wednesday. I'll give a recap right after that. Cheers, guys. SKD 143.